Hi, everyone who is joining. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said earlier, we are going to be talking about breath awareness and the basics of breath work today with Dave. And here he is.
Hello, hello. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see Melissa,
Nice to
the
see you.
breathwork master. Yeah, it's good to be here.
All right, Dave. So lay it on us. What is the most important thing to you when it comes to breath work?
It's quite a good question, actually. I would say exploring the breath is probably the most important component because it's something, the more you do it, the deeper it goes, and the more you learn to master it, and the more you start to realize how it really impacts every level of your being. And so I would say having curiosity about your breath would probably be the most important thing in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, because the breath is the beginning of everything. It's the first thing we do when we're born.
And it's the end of everything too, which is
Yes.
quite interesting. That's why, a lot of the functions in the body are mostly involuntary. Your heartbeat, your digestion, and the breath is that one function that's both voluntary and involuntary. And to me, that was kind of the clue as to how to start gaining more control of your physiology. And so you realize a lot of the involuntary functions can become voluntary through the breathing because it's all controlled by the nervous system. And the body is a cybernetic system, which means the system of systems. And the breathing, the nervous system that controls the breath is one of the fundamental motor patterns, which means it controls everything. And so that's why we always say, change your breath, change your life, because you will literally change your life when you change how you start to breathe.
Yeah, you literally can just take one breath and it can change your perception on life completely. Like if you're really angry or if you're really depressed and you're caught up in your mind about something that's making you feel that way, and you just take a deep breath and you put all your focus back into the breath and the body, you pull yourself out of your mind and you're able to just feel without, reacting. And then in that same moment, you're able to start to let go of whatever's making you not feel yourself.
Yeah, well said. I think that was the one of the greatest insights I learned from breathing was it's kind of the bridge between everything. In a lot of the posts that I write, I always say that breath is the bridge because we tend to separate mind and body. And when you move more into your head, you're more in a state of fear because the brain evolved for survival. And so for millions, if not billions of years, it's always watching for danger. It evolved for preservation. And so when we move more into the head and we're overthinking, we always tend to be in fear. And when you move into the body, you tend to be fearless. And so the breath is the bridge between these two layers. Every time you change your state, maybe into uh, like hunger or anger or arousal or fear or any state that you go into, the first thing that will change is your breathing. It's kind of like the mechanism behind state changes. And so I think that's really important because everything in life is just kind of like a tool. Training is a tool, meditation, and you can also say breathing is a tool, and it is, but we all have a body, and you all live inside your body, which means that it's not just a tool, it's actually like a catalyst for growth, for change, for everything. And so when I discovered breath work, like it literally changed my life. I'm curious, how did you get into breathwork? What was like the catalyst? Do you remember a moment or a person or an event?
Well, I think the person who really made me understand the power behind it is Wim Hof, which I learned about him back in college, my junior year. So that would have been 2015. And I started using breathwork I was running in Division 1 track at the time as a sprinter. And so the breathwork really helped me activate those extra fast and twitch muscles more than I was ever able to before. And I started to really see the differences through athleticism using the breathwork in there. And moving on from college, I revisited breathwork after I realized how powerful it is to regulate your emotions and to heal from past traumas, which is something that I was really working on at this moment in time. And so breathwork really is just the catalyst of like everything when it comes to alignment. Like whatever you're trying to achieve in your life, like the breath is like the foundation of everything. So if you can master the breath, you can master whatever you want, honestly.
Love it. I love it. And it's exactly how I feel, which is why anyone who meets me at one point, we're going to talk about breathing or we're going to do some breathing together.
Yeah.
Because it's also, it's so authentic, as in when you meet someone, there's often all these layers that we have to bypass of like, oh, this is me, this is my job, this is blah, blah. But when you breathe with someone, there's no talking involved. There's no mental intrusion. It's all the body. It's all real. And you live inside your body. You experience the world through your body. And so connecting with your breath is like connecting with life. That's why we call it prana. It's like life force. And so, yeah, it's interesting. If you read a lot of different religious texts, there's always a reference to the breathing. I'm not too familiar with a lot of them, but even in the Bible, it says God breathed into the nostrils of Adam. And so there is this reference to it because I think it's like the fundamental of life. When you stop breathing, you're not here anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I want to ask you the same question, Dave. How did you get into breathwork? Like, what got you inspired to practice breathwork?
It actually started a long ago. I started noticing when I used to smoke a lot of cigarettes. I thought that's what the cool kids did. And so when I was 16, I started smoking. And I remember thinking like, wow, when you go out and drink alcohol, you feel pretty shit the next day. When you go out and you smoke and drink, like you feel tenfold different. And so I remember it was like the first glimmers of what importance the breath makes in everything. And then I started doing, actually before that I would follow Elliot Hulse on YouTube, and he always said, you just breathe into your balls. And like, I kind of meant what he meant, like breathe deep, but it still took a long time. I remember watching his videos and listening to him for a year or so before it started to click in my mind. And it wasn't until I started doing yoga that my teacher would teach me pranayama, and we'd do Kapalabhati or the fire breath or Nadi Sudhi, the alternating nostril breathing. And that's when I started realizing like, wow, you can really energize and change your body in big ways. And then what was great is that started to transition outside of yoga. And so when I would have like a difficult customer or a difficult emotion, like you keep returning to your breath. And I used to work in a restaurant for a long time, and the stress levels can get really high in those situations. And I used to write on my arm, just breathe. And so every time I reached for something, I would see it, and it would be a reminder to just like take that breath in. And as soon as you do that, like even if you just do it now, like you just breathe out and take that deep breath in. You can really feel like a shift, a state change just in one breath. And it's like you said in the beginning, even one breath can change it. And so, yeah, I kept it in my mind a lot, but I never really had a practice. I never really did it like a daily thing. I was just kind of bringing awareness to it. And then when I discovered Wim Hof, same as you, that's when it changed, because the Wim Hof is so like visceral, it's so real, it's so powerful that you can't not feel something. Like even if it feels horrible, you're gonna feel something. And so I remember the first time I did it, like my hands went tingly, my vision changed a little bit, and I was like, this is amazing. Yeah, it was cool. how long have you been practicing like a regular breathwork sessions? Like you actually made it into a practice?
I have been practicing mostly daily for the last like 2 to 3 years consistently. For
Wow.
like for through college, I'd only do it for like big track meets and stuff, or for practices that were extra hard. But now I've really committed to just doing it every single day because of how much benefit it brings to me in every aspect of my life. Like I love starting first thing in the morning, wake up, stretch, and breathe. Like that's my favorite thing because it really
Yes.
just sets the tone for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And I think because it's one of those things that you do all the time, people often don't really see the importance of it. They say
Mhm.
like, oh, I breathe every day. In fact, that's like whenever I tell someone like I'm gonna go do some breathing, they're like, what do you mean you breathe all the time? It's like, yeah, but you can do lots of things without thinking about it. And so what's interesting is humans are the only animal that actually falls into faulty breathing patterns. Like we learn bad breathing patterns. And there's lots of reasons, but the few that I'm aware of is that we sit. We're the only animal that sits. If you look at the skin on your hands and you look at the skin on your feet and then you look at the skin on your bum, they're very different. We're not meant to actually sit on our bum. We're always meant to like squat or use our hands or our feet. And so because of that, we change the posture of the body. And there are lots of extra respiratory muscles all in the upper chest and the clavicles by the ribs, and they start to close off. And so you can imagine, like, if you're, we all know what it's like when you sit too long. You feel very stiff and tight. And now if you were going to go running, like, it's not going to feel good. And it's like, it's very obvious that we feel that. But with the breath, it's quite a subtle thing. And so you don't see it so much. So when your body's all shut down, like the posture's changed, you're not going to breathe properly.
Mm-mm.
And you're not going to know that you're not breathing properly unless you bring awareness to it. And so if you look at animals and you look at babies, they breathe in the belly. They breathe diaphragmatically, deep and down. And we unlearn that pattern. I think a lot of it's from sitting and this forward posture from being on a cell phone.
Mm.
But yeah, a lot of people, if I try to correct their breathing, if I just tell them to breathe deeply, they actually can't because these muscles are so tight that they don't know how to open the body up and get that deep breathing in. So like the
Right.
stretch plus the breathing, yeah, it's kind of like your body's not really yours until you go through that process.
I love that. That's such a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Take back your
Um,
power. Go back to your breath.
yeah, but that's exactly it. And that's really my whole message to people is to reignite or help them remember the latent power, the real wisdom that lies in you. Because we often look at life and we think that this was it. Like, oh, this is how humans have always lived. Like, no, this is a very short amount of time. The last 10,000, 100,000 years were extremely different. And now we've created these kind of human zoos that we live in. And we think it's normal to feel tired and depressed and anxious. And your birthright is vitality. It's incredible. And what I love about studying the body and health is that you can always trace it back to how it's connected to everything. And so your body is literally made out of minerals of the earth, and you're made out of water that comes from the earth, and you're made out of oxygen. Oxygen is the most important nutrient. You can
Yes.
go weeks without food, days without water, but only minutes without oxygen. Unless you train, then you can go a bit longer. But so that's kind of the order of importance. So oxygen is really up there. And, when you breathe in, you're breathing in where other people have breathed in. I know it kind of doesn't sound really nice, but there's like an energy exchange. If you've ever been to like a yoga session where it's quite packed and you're all breathing together, there's a different kind of energy to it. You've gone to a crowded city where there's lots of cigarette smoke, it has a different feeling, like the breath.
Mm.
So it really is what connects you to all of life all the time. And
We
yeah,
are
it's great.
one.
It's really true, actually. Yeah, and when you think about how everything has to come together for this to exist, like, the sun gives you life. Everything on the earth was created because of the sun, and the moon affects us, and the earth. And so everything is all intricately connected, and it's really the same for your body. Like nothing ever works in isolation. And so if you want to get healthy, you like, oh, maybe I need to just eat better. And that's important, yes, very, but you also need to look at all the aspects. That's why I love holistic, because holistic comes from the Greek word holos, which means whole. And so it's a whole approach to everything. And so really, when I work with a client or even just talking to people, if they can change how they breathe, that will just ripple into everything else.
Yes. I was going to ask you, so I know you are a health coach and you have a lot of clients. What are the kinds of breathwork techniques that you introduce to people who have never done breathwork with you before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so before I work with someone, I need to check the biomechanics of how they breathe, actually like how their body is breathing. And before you can even start to teach somebody like breathe like this and do these different techniques, you actually need to correct the breathing patterns, because if you have a bad breathing pattern and then you try and do breath work, you're just going to further facilitate that bad breathing pattern. You're going to reinforce it. And so I would spend the first part like actually watching them breathe, like is it all chest breathing? And so we're supposed to breathe deep and down, and you're supposed to breathe through your nose. Your mouth was made for food, your nose is made for breathing, and the nose is quite deceptive because we think it's just this, but there's a whole structure inside of the face that changes air pressure, temperature, all of these kind of things that really impact the breathing. And so it also reduces the airflow by 50% and allows nitric oxide to build up, which is really important for opening up the blood vessels. And so the first thing I'd see is like, well, how do you breathe? And then I would give them a very simple practice. Just lie on the floor, one hand on the chest, one hand on the stomach, and for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, however many they can manage, you're only going to focus on moving the hand on the stomach. And I think that's such a great way to start to reconnect with the breathing, because if you can't do that diaphragmatic breathing, then all of the breath work is going to feel very frustrating, because again, all these muscles are closed off, which means that you can't actually get that proper breathing. And so a lot of people, they experience a lot of pain when they do the Wim Hof in the beginning. And a lot of that pain is because those muscles haven't moved for so long. They've just been shut down, and now you force them open. It's like, it doesn't feel so good. So I would always ease them into it. And almost every client and person that I've worked with, their problem isn't necessarily too much, it's too little. And so they tend to overdo things, maybe too much exercise or too much food or too much alcohol. It's always on the excessive end of it. And so I'd rather focus on slowing things down. So a lot of people struggle with the food. And when you really slow the body down, you start to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. When you're in the sympathetic, it's the fight and flight. And now if you mouth breathe, it triggers the chest to move. That is the sympathetic activation. And so when you breathe like that, you're telling your body that you're in danger and you need to run away or you need to fight. When you breathe through the nose, you can do the diaphragmatic breathing, and that activates this parasympathetic, which is like you can relax. And so especially for eating, like your body will not digest food in a sympathetic state. It's like, I've got to run away. What are you putting all this food in for me? We're putting that on the backlog. And so like just stopping and doing 3 really deep, slow breaths before you eat. Like it's so powerful, and I promise you will heal digestive problems that you didn't think you could heal. You will start to absorb more nutrients from the food. You'll just change your digestion in such a way, because your digestion is so linked to the brain. There's the vagus nerve, which communicates all the information. So whatever state you're in, determines how you're going to digest. If you're angry, you're not digesting your food. You're not really doing much. In fact, it's going to feel like indigestion. And so before you eat, you've got to really slow the breathing down. And so I try and teach people that, because everything in the body is a pattern. It's just a neural pattern, energy, electricity. And so if you fall into a bad breathing pattern, it's like you can't just do it once. You need to sprinkle it throughout the day. And so I'll say to them, like, do that lying down practice, maybe in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, because now you're starting to reestablish a new pattern. You're slowing the breathing down. And so, yeah, I think most people would benefit from a really slow and controlled breathing over the stimulating one. I love the stimulating one, and if people need a bit of a shock, we might chuck that in there just so that they can, because if you get that fast sympathetic activation from fast breathwork breathing, like the Wim Hof or fire breath, you're going to notice the impact of the breathing a lot more. So I might do that in the beginning just to show them what a difference it can make, especially if they are very anxious or a lot in their head, because that shift, even though I don't want to overstimulate the sympathetic system in the beginning, that shift allows them to really recognize the importance and the power of the breathing. So I'll do that in the beginning, and then their homework is like to slow the body down as much as they can.
That's so perfect. That's exactly why I made the Heart Sync song, because I read about how breathing for, 10 breaths per minute? Yeah, 10 breaths per minute helps you resynchronize your heart-mind coherence, which can bring so much benefit. And it actually boosts your self-awareness too, which I wanted to dive into, Dave. So I would love to hear your perspective. What is breath awareness to you? What does that mean to you?
That's a really good question, and it's honestly the best place to start. And so that's why in the beginning you asked me, I said curiosity, become curious about your breathing. And so breath awareness is the most important aspect of this. And I think breath awareness is life awareness, because it translates into everything. And so it's just becoming curious about how you actually breathing. Most of the people, when you speak to them, they will say like, oh, I didn't know I was holding my breath, or I didn't even know what I was breathing. And so when you bring awareness to it, and it's just simply like asking a question, like, how am I breathing right now? And you just bring your awareness to where you can feel your breath, how your body's feeling. And so it doesn't actually matter where you are, it matters that you bring awareness to it. So it's like, am I breathing through my mouth? Yes, that's actually good, because you just brought awareness to your breathing. It's like, am I breathing quite shallow? Yes, you brought awareness. So awareness is always the first step. If you don't know there's a problem, how can you fix it? So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and so I think the next step after awareness would be the actual biomechanics of breathing. And so there is an anatomically correct way for the body to breathe. And a lot of people, and this took me a long time too, to really understand the diaphragm, because people always say diaphragmatic breathing, but it's like, what are you talking about? I'm breathing to my belly. But a great way I learned that you can figure it out is if you block your nose and you breathe in, you will feel something pulling down in your solar plexus. That's your diaphragm. And so the diaphragm pulls down, which forces the lungs open. And so what we do in society is we love to have a flat stomach or a strong stomach. And so without even realizing, a lot of us tense all of those muscles. And when you tense those muscles, you're not going to breathe properly. You're not going to breathe fully, because now you're restricting that ability. And a lot of people actually have a lot of pelvic floor problems because of that, because they tense all those muscles when they're breathing. Because yeah, your muscles are hard, but what are your organs doing? They're all getting pushed down. And you do like 25,000 breaths a day. You do that to your body every day for 10 years, you're going to have a lot of health problems. And then, unfortunately, when you go to the doctor, they treat the problem. They don't correct the breathing. And this is why I'm so passionate about breathing, is because every course I've studied, everything of coaching, of nutrition, of health, they never talk about breathing. And it's like, if you're not fixing that, you're kind of just putting a plaster or a band-aid over the situation. Like, you need to go deeper. Of course, there are a lot of nuance to these problems, but I just think that starting with the breath is so important. Yeah, so
I agree.
yeah, that's what I love to hear. And it's interesting to notice how much, what's the word? Like, not restrictions, it's like we feel judged when we breathe, or like, so I was with a friend and she was really stressed, and there is a physiological reason why we sigh, because when you go, it actually releases pressure on the chest, on the heart, because when you breathe in, your chest fills with air and it puts pressure on your heart. So your heart rate actually increases on an in breath, and your heart rate will slow down on an out breath. And that's why you can stretch further when you're doing yoga when you breathe out. So you breathe in and you hold the stretch, and you breathe out, you can do it a little bit further, and you can really work with your body. And so many people work against their body. I see it in the gym, I see it in yoga classes, I've even seen it in breathwork classes, of how it's like this fight, and you can't fight the breath because you will lose. And so it's really like a surrendering to it, or really bringing that curiosity. And so, sorry, I got off track a little bit, but the most important thing is really breathing through the nose. It seems a little bit silly to some people, but there's a reason it's shaped like this. It has a really important function. There's little turbinates inside the nostril that actually change the direction and the temperature of the breath, and that affects everything. And it also allows carbon dioxide to equalize. People think carbon dioxide is the waste gas, but carbon dioxide allows your blood vessels to take up oxygen, and it delivers oxygen better through your body. And so carbon dioxide feeds into anxiety. When you're very anxious, you're not going to be breathing properly. You're going to be exhaling lots of carbon dioxide off. That's why when they breathe into the bag, it actually helps, because they get to uptake more carbon dioxide. And so when you think about breathing, you kind of need to think about it like training. You have to train your body to be better at breathing. And so every good athlete will know the importance of breathing, actually. Actually, that's not true. Sorry. A lot of good athletes don't. I've seen it on television where a lot of chest breathing, and you'll watch, like, after 4 rounds of fighting, that man is gassed, and he loses because he didn't control his breathing. So breathe through the nose is super important. And the next thing is the position of the tongue. The tongue is one of the strongest muscles in your body, actually, and it has a purpose other than shuffling food. It's supposed to be pressed up against the roof of the mouth, and this provides cranial support for the whole head, and actually changes the way air intake flows through the body. And so when you mouth breathe and the tongue is like loose on the bottom of the mouth, it doesn't create the right support for the chin. And so the chin line will start to go backwards. And so a lot of people have like this kind of a chin, and it's largely due to mouth breathing. It's not actually genetics, because you're going to breathe 25,000 times a day. Each breath is going to impact everything in your body, and now you're breathing incorrectly. So it has this chain effect. And mouth breathing will lead to crooked teeth in children. If you look at a lot of indigenous people, they got strong jaws and good teeth without Colgate, without all this stuff. And you look at a lot of Western people, they have the receding jawline and crooked teeth. And so it's really important to breathe through the nose. Now, often people get congestion in the nose, and a lot of that can be from air pollution, from pollen, from all these sensitivities. And really, your diet plays a big part in that. Any time you have something that creates an allergic reaction or inflammation, it's going to shut down a lot of these sensitive pathways, and it's going to force you to mouth breathe. And even worse, you're going to mouth breathe at night, which means that for 8 hours, you're creating this really tense environment in your body, and that can lead to hypertension. And people with a long list of health problems, there's a tape you can get called myotape that closes your mouth, so you're forced to breathe through your nose. And after 1 week, so many of those problems go away. Like people who had potential heart attacks or hypertension, it really starts to change. And so you can really see the importance of correct breathing and nasal breathing. And so if you live in an environment that's quite polluted or dusty, what I do is I just take a glass of water. It's not the most, what's the word, most attractive thing to watch, but you put some salt in the water, quite a lot of salt, and then you put it to your nose, and you're going to inhale the water until it comes out the little roof, the holes in the roof of your mouth, and this is going to flush your nasal passageways. And like, of all the little health routines that I have, that's probably one of the most important things, because again, if you're not breathing properly, nothing's working properly. So clear the sinuses, clear the nasal passageways, and allow that free flowing of air.
Is there a type of salt you would recommend people to use?
I don't know if it's as important because you're not actually ingesting the salt, but I use Himalayan salt or Celtic sea salt. If I was going to eat a salt, it'd be those two. But I don't think it's super important. I'm not a big fan of table salt, or because they also put other chemicals in there. So salt's not expensive, and investing in a little bag of salt is really a good investment. I always travel with a little bag of salt. People think I'm pretty strange, but
Cool.
I want to breathe.
I have salt in my shower that I use for the same purpose. So.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah. And I think this goes back to the awareness. Like, if you don't know what it feels like to have a free flow of oxygen, you're not going to know if you're not breathing properly. And so all these little things are kind of like giving us flashes of awareness of how it really feels to breathe properly, breathe full, smooth airways. Yeah.
I think you're being asked for an example of how to do the saltwater day.
I can't do it here because I'll make a big mess, but I actually, so you just kind of put your nose in the water, and it will start to come out your mouth because it can't go into your lungs. So there's little holes in the roof of your mouth that will come out. And if it doesn't, you just go harder. You got to snort that stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you're basically just snorting water and salt.
Yeah, yeah. And the city I'm in right now is really dusty. So every morning I wake up and my nose is blocked, like proper blocked. And I just sit there. If it takes 2 minutes, it takes 2 minutes. And harder and harder, and it will come through. And because the salt, it will kill a lot of the bacteria and it'll loosen things up. And what will happen is, like, maybe a minute afterwards, your nose will just start to leak. It's not very attractive, but it's like you need to have free-flowing airways. I really believe that a lot of people's health problems could be fixed just by snorting some salt water.
Yeah, in breatharian world, we breathe air and we snort water to feel good.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great. Yeah, so I learned this a lot from travel. Like, I traveled a lot the last 3 years, and you really have to find little tips and tricks to keep yourself healthy, because you're exposed to lots of different chemicals and radiation and EMFs and sleep deprivation and strange foods. And so the breath was the one thing that I could always rely on that would carry me in any difficult situation. And so you start to get a feel. Like, I do a lot of like facial massage for the sinus pathways. Yeah, exactly. It's really powerful. And a lot of people spend money on Botox when if you just start to apply some gentle pressure on the daily, like, you can keep your skin strong and healthy.
Yeah, I use facial cupping for that. I have like a little rose quartz tool I use for that, and I always like hit right here. And after I do that, I can breathe so much better.
Yeah,
amazing.
and your whole being like comes alive. It feels better. And so, yeah, definitely keeping the passageways clear, I would say, is most important. So it's reading the messages, most important part. Yeah. So
Did get one question, but we had one question come through. Someone,
yeah.
Iris, I can't say the name, I'm so sorry.
Here it is, my man.
He asked, what are the types of breath work and how do each of them act in the body?
Okay, it's a really good question, brother. Thank you. So I would say there's two main types because there's two main pathways of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system governs everything in your body. And so the one pathway is the sympathetic, the other pathway is the parasympathetic. The para is your rest and digest, so it's for relaxing, and the sympathetic is for fight and flight, so it's all adrenaline based. Now, technically they're always both on, but you can swap states, and so you can be more sympathetic dominant. And in fact, each person will be more dominant in one naturally through genetics. So maybe you're a sympathetic dominant, you quite high energy, quite vocal. Like energy is not your problem, calming down is your problem. Things like that. Yeah. So short, like really slowing the breathing down would be the rest and digest. If you think about it, like if you need to run, you need to breathe fast. If you want to like calm down, you're going to breathe slowly. So the calmer and slower and lighter you breathe, the more parasympathetic will be activated. The faster and more intense you breathe, the more sympathetic. So most breath work, in fact, almost all, I've only met one person that teaches the other way. Most breath work is the sympathetic state. So it's high energy, adrenaline, cortisol activation, and that's the faster breathing. But that can be good. Just because it's sympathetic doesn't mean it's bad. It's like going to the gym, you stress your muscles, they get stronger afterwards. So a slight stimulation of the sympathetics actually has a lot of positive. It's just when your overall stress is too high, then constantly breathing like that might overstress your system and you could burn out. So that's when rest management is important. So I would say the other way of breathing is actually more important because now you're really training your body in biochemistry. So you're slowing the breathing down. As you slow the breath down, like really make it lighter and shallower. When I say shallow, I don't mean in the chest. I mean like breathe less volume. Then you increase carbon dioxide. As you increase carbon dioxide, oxygen will get better delivered to your tissues and organs, and it causes vasodilation. So your blood vessels open up. And so this is the correct way to breathe. You should actually practice this maybe 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or even once a day. But you want to spend some time really slowing the breathing down because now you're actually training your body to utilize oxygen better. So I hope that answers your question, my man. Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
I think that was the only one so far, but I didn't want to forget about it, so I wanted to just bring it up.
So some of these great comments are quite funny. Yeah, so those would be the 2 kinds. But really, it's just breath awareness. Bringing your awareness to the breath as often as you can, I would say, is the most important. Like what my mentor taught me was he even tied a little piece of string around his stomach. And so if he was not belly breathing, then the string would move. And if he was belly breathing, the string wouldn't move. So it's kind of like a physical reminder to breathe deep and down. And so it does take a while. It took me many years to get into the habit of consciously coming back to the breath. And it always takes time. So you'll notice that any external event will take you out of the breath. You know, so you get angry, your breath changes, or you're watching something, you're not breathing properly, you're concentrating, you're not breathing properly. So it's kind of like everything's taking you away from this awareness, and you need to keep bringing it back. So whatever you need to do that is important. I would write little sticky notes. I'd write on my arm. I'd set reminders on my phone. But this is why having a breathwork practice is so important, because you're setting aside that time to breathe. And one, you're actually training your breathing, or you're creating more awareness, but two, you're making the time to be conscious of the breath. So out of all the things I teach, I'd probably say that is the most important. If someone had a good breathing practice every day, that would eliminate so many of their mental and physical ailments.
Because it's all connected.
Yeah, it really is, you know, and every time, like I've been doing this for many years, I've met many people, I've tried different yoga practices, Wim Hof's, different styles of the Wim Hof, my own versions, the Kraut, and so it doesn't end. Like it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, you know, what I love about Wim Hof is you can say whatever you want about that man, but he did it, and he did it with scientists evaluating him. So you can't disprove what he's done. And he said, I'm not any different from you. You can all do this. Mm-hmm. And in fact, he's got a twin brother that can't do it because he didn't try. And so that's like the genetics, not a special superhuman. So Wim Hof is kind of my hero.
Mine too.
Our hero.
I love him.
Yeah, so...
yeah, and just to add on your whole thing with breath awareness and the importance of practicing it, this is why I love practicing breathwork first thing in the morning, because when you practice conscious breathing, you're already becoming aware of your breath. So if you're doing that the first thing in the morning, then you're going to set the tone to always be more aware of the breath for the rest of the day, which can help with so many things.
Exactly right, Melissa. And that's where that old adage, win the morning, win the day, comes from. You set the tone for the rest of the day. And so I'm exactly the same. The first thing in the morning, I like to get my breathing in. Even when I had a broken neck, I would still go and do the breathing. I think it's super important.
There's another question.
Let's see, Eric Clares, my man. What are those sensations we feel when we do, for example, an alkaline breath? Do they have an explanation? They definitely do. You are sensing the shift from acidity to alkaline state. That's why we call it the alkaline breath. And so there's many layers to it. That's right, boy. There's many layers to it, but I would say the sensations you are feeling is the shift from acidity to more alkaline. It gets more technical, but I don't want to get too technical because you have different acidities, like the acidity of your stomach, the acidity of your blood, the acidity of your mouth. The pHs are all different, so people always go back and forth. But overall, that's the gist of it, really. Yeah, and then, you know, it's like every cell in your body depends on oxygen. And so a person who has very little blood flow and oxygen delivery is going to feel very different to a person who has high blood flow and oxygen delivery. When you're doing these kind of breathings, you are changing the biochemistry, oxygen and carbon dioxide, and you're increasing them, which means better delivery. And so you can get oxygen in a can, and if you inhale that, like, you're going to feel very different in your mind. And so that's a lot of what you're experiencing as well, is this increase in the gases. You know, nitric oxide is another one. Nitric oxide causes vasodilation, opening of the blood vessels. So that's why it's so important, because it's these things you can't really see or taste or touch, whatever, but it's the most important, the biochemistry of your breath. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I used to be super obsessed with wanting to be alkaline all the time. So I would do Dan's alkaline breathing. I would drink alkaline water. I'd only eat fruit. I'd only drink celery juice in the morning. Literally everything I would do is because I wanted to be more alkaline than acidic.
Well, I mean, I get that. Once you discover those things, you kind of always want to, I think you're like me, you want to push things a lot. And so when you find something new, you do it to the max. But,
yeah.
You know, a lot of people with digestive problems, their problem is not alkaline, it's actually acidity. Their stomach acids are too alkaline. And that's what GERD, gastric intestinal reflux disease, is. Their stomach is so alkaline, that the lower esophageal sphincter, which separates your esophagus from your stomach, doesn't close properly, doesn't get the signal to close. And so acid starts to come up and they get acid reflux. And so what happens when you go to the doctor, they give you an antacid, something that makes you more alkaline, but that's the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be making yourself more acidic in the stomach, not everywhere. It's very different. You have to have an acidic stomach, otherwise how are you going to digest your food? So yeah, it's important to remember these things. Interesting, I read a study on the Wim Hof, and one of his, I don't want to call them disciples because it makes it sound like a cult, but one of his people that works with him, he did a continuous blood glucose monitor. So it always measures your blood glucose levels. And he ate his lunch and he saw the spike, and he did the Wim Hof and the spike dipped. And so this kind of breathing, like intentional different breathing, actually affects blood glucose levels as well. And so I wouldn't be a fan of doing Wim Hof after you eat, because again, digestion depends on, you know, apart from it being uncomfortable and like that, digestion depends on your sympathetic state. And so if you're parasympathetic, you're going to digest your food properly. If you're sympathetic, it's not going to work. So really slowing the breathing down. In fact, that's what the nostrils do as well. The left nostril is more parasympathetic, the right nostril is more sympathetic. And so if you breathe through your right nostril, you'll start to build like energy in your body. And so the left nostril is more for slowing down. And so I don't do it, but you can. Like, you can breathe more through the left nostril before you eat, and it would actually increase your digestion, absorbability, and assimilation.
I also love, one other thing I really love to do to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is humming. Humming helps to activate the vagus nerve that runs from your neck down into the rest of the organs of your body. And I love doing humming after I work out. Like while I'm stretching, I'll literally hum on my exhale while I'm stretching, because I can feel it just brings me more into that parasympathetic state.
Wow.
And same with
really
after eating food too. After having a big meal, I'll sit and just hum on my exhales for a little while, because it helps my body digest the food faster.
Wow, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to start doing that as well.
Like,
because I also read that humming increases, yeah, that's exactly it. The bee breath, we used to call it in yoga.
Humming bee breath.
I was reading that the humming increases the levels of nitric oxide in the nose, in the brain by 15 times. Like, that is huge. And so you're delivering so much oxygen to your brain in a natural way just through humming. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah.
Yes, brother. I love it, dude.
Yes.
I think that's, thank you for bringing that up, bro, because it's actually something that we don't also talk about, is intention, is the reasoning, the energy behind what you're doing. And so the way I like to think of intention is putting tension into potential. And so life can be seen as limitless potential. The world is limitless potential, and as a conscious being, we put tension into that potential and we can create something. And so this is why you can say I love you a million different ways. It's not the words, it's the energy behind the words, and they're really important. So that's a good point. Before doing breath work, set an intention. What do you actually want? And it'll definitely be more powerful.
Absolutely. And every single breathwork book that I have read, they always highlight the importance of setting an intention before the breathwork, because setting that intention is what drives the breath into the direction that you want it to go, like what you want to achieve out of it. So you're literally commanding, like setting that affirmation commands exactly what you want to get out of it.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, it's really powerful. And I think by having that practice with the breathing, you can start to get the real-time feedback application of it. So you start to really notice the impact. but I really feel like you could apply it to everything. I learned that with training. I realized that having the intention whilst you're training changes everything. Two people can have the same workout, the same meals, but this guy can get really strong and this person gets not strong or weaker just because of how they think about it, you know? So yeah, setting that intention with everything. I think it's a great idea. Beautiful.
Amen for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you ever think that you can do too much?
Too much breath work? I honestly don't think you could do too much. I mean, you look at people like monks in Thailand and other parts of the world that will sit for literally days and just breathe. So I feel like if you really wanted to do that, you can. I don't think you can breathe too much. I don't think you can overdo it. You can't overdose on breath work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just from where I'm coming from. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I definitely think there should be a warning that comes with breathing because, and I don't think most people would go this far. You really have to push it, but you can do too much. And what starts to happen is you super saturate your cells with oxygen and you can't move.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a friend once and I taught her the Wim Hof. And I said to her, like, just do 30 to 40 breaths 3 times. And she just kept pushing it. She kept pushing it. And you will super saturate yourself with oxygen and you can't move. Your body goes rock hard. My friend that I just visited in France, he did that. He did 360 Wim Hof breaths. And he couldn't move for 15 minutes. Everyone was panicking. His hands were stuck like this. He couldn't talk. So there is a danger to it, but you really have to push hard. And I think for most people, you will feel way too uncomfortable before you get to that point. So I think there is a danger to it, but I don't think that it applies to most people. But just be careful. Like, that's why it's a training. You're not going to go to the gym and lift 500 kilograms, however many pounds.
So it's more like the more intense breathing. You're saying don't overdo that.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yes, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So you can't overbreathe. You'll stay alive.
We're already breathing all day, every day.
Exactly. So yeah, I think like normal breathing or conscious breathing or the box breathing or coherent breathing, you can't really go too far, but the powerful stimulating breathing, you can definitely do some damage. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense because that kind of breathing comes with a lot of force, you know, so that does make a lot of sense. You're forcing the body to be in a more intense state than it normally resides in, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Can breathwork help people that suffer with sleep paralysis? Oh man, I used to get that a lot. It's horrible. So absolutely, man, absolutely, it can help. So the reason we get sleep paralysis is as we shift through the different states of consciousness, like something doesn't really work properly in the brain and they meld together. So you become conscious in a dream and the dream's always a nightmare. It is kind of connected because your body secretes a chemical that paralyzes you because you don't want to go acting out your dreams, but it also paralyzes your lungs. And so when you're in the nightmare, when you get a fright or you're scared, you want to change your breathing. But because you can't, because your lungs are paralyzed, it creates this intense fear and pressure in your body. It's really horrible. I know it very well. And so it's definitely connected. I would say that, do you want to weigh in on this? Do you have any thoughts?
I was just thinking, I mean, I don't know a whole bunch of science behind sleep paralysis, but I do know that through astral projection, sleep paralysis happens quite often. And I do remember from some of the training that I took on astral projection is like when you get in that sleep paralysis, you just have to like focus on the sound of your breath. Like you have to come back to the breath even when you're in that state, and it should help release that fear that you're like trapped in, so you can leave your body.
Yes, that's really cool because I know Eric Clares practices astral projection. So that's what's happening. You're like shifting between the states of consciousness, and there can be some strange overlap. But I think the reason it always feels like a nightmare is because your lungs are paralyzed and you're trying to breathe. It feels intense. But I would say practice regular, slow breathing through the day. Bring awareness to the breathing. Set an intention before you go to bed.
And if you are a lucid dreamer, one thing that really helps is try to become aware of your breath in the dream.
Wow. Yeah, that's
super
actually,
powerful.
Yeah. It's been a long time for me, so I haven't had the opportunity to try it, but it's cool.
Yeah, super fun.
Okay, what's this one? That's what some monks get each night in seeking that I heard anyway. Well, that's cool, man. I was terrified when I had sleep paralysis. I thought demons and aliens were coming to take me away because I couldn't open my eyes, and I felt this like monster coming close. And I was like, I just want to move. If I can move, I can fight. It's awful. Yeah, but I think it's great. All of these things are always connected. Everything is connected to the breath. The breath controls everything in your body. Your mental state, your digestion, your emotions, your level of connection to life, you know.
Your brain waves.
Exactly. So it's always related and it's always connected. And I think bringing that awareness is always the first step. Trying to ensure that you always breathe through your nose. Practice putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Practice diaphragmatic breathing. Practice speeding your breathing up. Practice slowing it down. You're just building self-awareness all the time, and that's really what you want because you live inside your body. You know how you feel. You're the best nutritionist. You're the best coach. You're the best everything because you live inside yourself. And so no one can tell you how you're feeling, only you do. And as you explore these sensations and you go deeper in the journey, like it will really reveal a lot to you about how much power you have, ability, potential is a better one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can heal with the intention. You got it, man. And you did a lot when I met you. Like in a short time, you really jumped ahead quickly. So you've got that potential, brother. You got that power. You just need to get it. Yes, I love it, dude. It's nice that you're here, my man. It's good to see you. We'll have a live sometime soon as well, brother.
Yeah. We have a minute left before the hour ends. I think it ends with an hour. So,
yeah, it does. Good time to wrap it up.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to everybody for being here, and thank you to everyone who's watching in the future. You guys are amazing. And if you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to send either me or Dave a message, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. And this will also be posted on both our accounts. So if you didn't get to watch this now, you can watch it later. And lastly, I have a breathwork on Sunday group gathering. It's totally free. Anybody can join. You can sign up in the link of my bio. Dave will be there. And so, yeah, thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for being here and sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me here, Melissa. It's always a pleasure. And keep doing what you're doing. I think it's beautiful.
Likewise. The feeling is mutual. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Shout Eric Clares. See you, brother. Ciao.